Good evening, everyone. The time is 7:33 on Thursday, October 17th, 2024, and I am calling the Village of Martins Additions Council meeting to order. First item on our tonight's agenda, and something everyone can agree on, we need to know about the weather. So here's our VMA resident weatherman of Turner Lane, Keith Allen, with his report.
Warm up for the main event here today. Anyway, tonight, we've got a full super moon. And we've got a crystal clear sky, and so that'll be coming up later on this evening if you want to get out and take a look at that, because that's going to be beautiful. And beautiful is the operative word as far as the weather's concerned. For the next 2 weeks, right through Halloween, there may not be a drop of rain. We've had all that rain at the end of September going into the 1st of October. That lasted for about 10 to 14 days, cloudy, dreary, dismal, dank, dark, dull, depressing. But we've got some fine fall weather for everybody to enjoy, highs during the day in the 70s, 50s at night. So that's pretty. Now, next month, I'm going to have the outlook for the winter. Right now, it looks like it's going to be very mild and kind of like it's been the last 2 or 3 years with very little snow. So I hear somebody coming up the stairs now. Hopefully that will be the county executive. And I'll welcome him as he walks through the door.
Keith, one question.
Yes, sir.
With this drum roll happening.
Okay.
Can you tell us, not to put you on the spot, about the peak leaves? Do we know when that is supposed to happen?
I can tell you that's going to be around here is going to be Halloween. And it's going to go into November for the city and points south and southeast of the district.
Awesome.
But I promise that the foliage will not disappoint.
Good.
Because we're going to have some beautiful autumn leaves. Okay, I guess they went next door, so carry on. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Keith. Thanks for being the warm-up act for our headliner, who should be here shortly. Until his arrival, we could take some resident comments, perhaps that are unrelated to attainable housing. Are there any residents who would like to make a comment at this point? In the room or on the Zoom?
Those are the people that
Mhm.
Did you say unrelated?
Unrelated to attainable housing, yes.
Marty has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Marty.
I'm trying to unmute myself. Hang on.
You're on mute.
Unmuted. Yeah.
We can hear you, Marty.
Oh, okay, good. I just want to say special thank you to Katie and the whole council for inviting our county executive here. I think it's a first, certainly in my 40 years in Martins Additions, and I'm really just delighted you did this. So just kudos and bravo and thank you so much. The zoning thing is huge, and thank you for getting our exec here. That's terrific.
Thank you, Marty. Anybody in the room have a comment, resident comment, concern? Oh, Larry?
Well, I just want to,
Oh, yes, you get to stand at the podium.
yeah, it's just, I very much want to thank you also for that. I think you've done us a great service for getting this arranged. So thanks.
Well, thank you. He's not here yet, but I appreciate it. Yes, anyone else have any comments? Let's see, any residents? Okay. All right. Well, I mean, while we're waiting, maybe we should just take some other items on the agenda, maybe perhaps approval of the September council meeting minutes. Have all the council had a chance to review the minutes?
Reviewed by a lot, yes.
Okay,
I move to approve.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and that's good.
Easy.
Easy, yeah. Okay, and then let's talk a little bit about committee reports. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. I don't know if we have extra agendas for our guests or residents in the room, but okay. So we'll do committee reports real quickly. Our FY 2025 committees and task forces were announced last month and have started meeting. Thank you to Village Attorney Ron Bolt, who led a very informative volunteer orientation and session on the Maryland Open Meetings Act on September 30th. If several members have completed their volunteer paperwork, but if you have not yet, we ask that you stop by the village office to do so. Do we have any updates from committee members in attendance? How about Keith Allen? Keith Allen again.
On the Community Engagement Committee. And we've got our Halloween event that's coming up on the last Sunday of the month. And we've got the Roaming Rooster food truck that's back again this year. We've had that the last couple of years. DJ from DJG Events, face painting, balloon twisting, face works, pumpkin decorating, and the costume party parade. And I'll have the fire department and the police department lead that parade. We've decided this year, we think because last year we went up on Brookville Road and then went down Shepherd Street, it might be a little safer for the kids if we go behind the stores, maybe go down Taylor Street, go through the village over there on the north end, come back around and back behind the stores and go down Turner. Right, Mike?
Correct, and you're meeting with your committee for the first time a week from today on the 24th, so everyone knows.
Okay. And that's it. And good evening and welcome. And carry on.
Well, thanks again, Keith.
No, that's all right. She's good.
I know that,
Can
yes.
I, just say that the water committee
Mhm.
lost a member. And so we're looking for volunteers. So people who are listening here and online, if you want to be on the water committee, it's an important committee. They do a lot of good and hard work. Submit your name. Also, I do want to suggest and advise everyone on committees to take the Public Meeting Acts course. It helps you understand why we have the kinds of restrictions, controls, and constraints that we do, and you also get a diploma at the end that's suitable for framing. So please take the course.
Okay, thank you, Arthur. And, well, I know we had, the election committee also met,
They
which you
met
both
too.
liaison. Marty, would you like to provide an update on the election committee?
I'd be delighted. And
Sorry to put
Katie,
you on the spot.
No, glad to do it. We were able, our meeting, I was on the 14th, this is Monday night, but we were able to put together a very short committee report, which we sent to the council today and to Michael. And it was a really productive meeting. One of the first things we need to do each year is set up the schedule for the upcoming election. And we were able to discuss and do that, and that's attached to our report. The red line showing the differences from last year's schedule are in our committee meeting packet. And the council has that. That was due to you 6 months before the election, so we're actually a month ahead of time on it. If you wanted to approve that schedule tonight, you certainly could do so, or you could wait till next month's council meeting to approve it, but we got it in on time. We did have one request for council action. At the September meeting, Katie, I think you were the one who very kindly announced that 2 of the 9 recommendations from last year's committee had been approved by the council, and we thank you for that. One of them was about adding a recount provision in the regs. And there was a mention about following the state rules on that. And the state rules are pretty, I mean, they're doable, but they're a lot more complicated than the simple recount provision that last year's committee had recommended. And I think Katie and Arthur, you were both at the meeting. Arthur, thank you for being our election committee liaison this year. And Jeff, I think you're one of our liaisons too, so thank you all. But the discussion at the committee was that there's a simpler way to do a recount than the 5%. And several committee members noted that if you follow the 5% formula in the state regs, which are 4 pages long, by the way, and are in the meeting packet from our committee meeting on Monday, the recount margin varies from one election to the next and has to be recalculated every year. And the size of the margin that would allow a losing candidate to ask for a recount could vary from as low as 4 or 5 votes if there was a small turnout to more than 20 votes if you had 400 people voting. And we thought as a committee that it might be a whole lot simpler and certainly easier to apply to just set a flat rate. Last year's committee had said that if the margin between the winning and losing candidates was fewer than 10 votes, the losing candidate could request a recount. This year's committee thought that sounded pretty reasonable for VMA. And we would like to ask number one, thank the council for letting us put in a recount provision, because we do think that's important. We agree with you on that. And can we just do the flat rate, the 10 vote margin, as opposed to having to calculate it every year? What do you all think? We're asking for the council's permission to do the simpler version.
Well, it's not a really heavy lift just to recalculate every year if we're just talking about the disparity. So I think it follow the state. Just have
Well,
a
you know, municipal
percentage.
governments do have a fair amount of latitude to determine their own workable procedures, and the entire committee
course.
felt that the flat rate was much more workable, clearer to candidates as well as easier for the committee.
May I make a suggestion? Unless I'm mistaken, is this a burning issue that we need to settle tonight? Because I know it might be good to have the full council. Maybe we could kind of absorb it a bit. If there
Sure.
are any legal issues, I don't think there are, in terms of can we deviate from the state on this, and then we can decide next month.
I
Is that,
mean, it's better to
Just-
chance to
Mhm.
circulate.
Put it on next month's.
is that
agenda.
okay?
Right.
Marty,
Yeah.
would you and the committee be okay with that? I see, Ron, you've unmuted. Was there something that you wanted to share?
No, I was just anticipating a question, but yeah, if it's
Oh.
gonna be deferred, then talk about it next month.
Okay, to respond to your point, Jeffrey, yes, thank you. The committee will be reviewing the regulations, the full document, all 12 pages of it, at our next meeting on November 4th. So it'd be nice to have the council's feedback on this very simple minor issue before November 4th, so that we can put the regs together to get them to you in early December. So yeah, next month is fine. And again, the committee was unanimous in saying, keep it simple. No need to go through the calculations. And calculations, of course, can be challenged. Did we compute it right? As I said, the state regs go on for 4 pages about how to compute that percentage. It's not just as simple as one might hope. Whereas saying if the margin is 10 votes or less, you can do a recount. That's really straightforward and easy to understand. So the committee did express a unanimous view here, and we appreciate your input next month, sometime before November 4th, before our next meeting, so we can put the regs together. And that's it. Thank you. We appreciate your support. We appreciate the help we get from our wonderful village staff, from Michael especially. So that's it for the committee report from the election. If you want to go ahead and approve the schedule for the election, you could do that tonight, or you could do that next month.
Well, I think we'll wait till next month. We're a man down. Our vice chair, Andrew Cowders, he was unable to attend tonight. He's in Germany, for a family, medical emergency. So, I'd like the full council to be present for that, Marty. So, but thank you. Thank you for your meeting, for your election committee report. And were there any other committees? I don't think any other committees have met yet. Yeah.
Happy to do treasurer's report.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Blandry. Yes, would you do the treasurer's report next?
I'd be delighted, and I must say, usually by the time I do treasurer's report, we're lucky if the entire council is still here, let alone folks in the room, so appreciate it.
Hi, let's-
But as Arthur, who has been our illustrious treasurer for many years, would say, we're in good shape. But in all seriousness, I think you may have a handout and you can see sort of the actual budgeted, accumulated, as well as monthly. And so really there are no surprises here for those who are perhaps looking at this for the first time, or it's been a while. In terms of our income, just so everyone could appreciate, the majority of our income comes from income tax. There is some property tax, but our actual property tax effectively is almost zero. I'm stating this because it has implications for what we'll hear from Executive Elrich coming up on terms of upzoning. But with that said, it comes in cycles. So usually we get these big tranches. So again, when we see spikes or if we see dips in our income on a month-to-month basis, that is not worrisome whatsoever. We have certain periodic moments within each quarter of the year that we'll get these big tranches. And other than that, I think 2 things I'll point out with the income. We've had an artificial sweetener or sweeteners over the last couple of years. We've had the ARPA funds that are still being programmed for this year. That was almost about $1 million. And then also, as everyone knows, perhaps from the other side, whether it's credit cards or adjustable mortgages and other things, the interest rates have gone up. So we've really had very sizable returns on our reserves. But, you know, the thing is that within a year or two, we expect those interest rates to drop. And we also expect that the ARPA funds, again, those are one-off sweeteners. And so we're looking very carefully. If you look at our budget, our expenses versus income every year, if you take out those two sweeteners, they're very close, right? Now, we've got a lot of reserves. If you can see here, we've got very significant reserves. We're in a very enviable position. So even if we started to cross over from income to expenses in a very, you know, very slight way, you know, as Arthur and I and everyone else we've talked about, probably wouldn't have an issue for the next 10 years. Now, with that said, that's why the Elrich discussion will be so important, is we'll hear that this is all part of understanding we're zoned for single family and the capital improvements we might have for what we're currently zoned for. But the challenge then becomes, and it's as a note here in the treasurer's report, if the R60s are upzoned for multifamily, what does that mean in terms of infrastructure? And there was something that wasn't as well publicized, but there was an income tax, impact tax, that the county council has been receiving recommendations to minimize. So there's a big at play here of the fact that if there is a lot of perhaps construction or other things that come in as part of higher density, how would we be able to support that? And will we be in a difficult or tenuous position to do it based upon what we may expect? So with that said, at the moment in the current, we're in great shape, and let's continue to hope that we will be for the foreseeable future.
I add to that, Madam Chairman.
Absolutely, yes.
One of the things that we see here is, Jeff has mentioned, is that our reserves are substantial, almost $6 million. With the prospect of densification in some manner, in some guise, over the next few years, one of the things to think about to do with that money, and I'm going to throw this out for people to start thinking about, is for the village to buy up properties that may come on the market and turn them into green spaces. They don't have to be bought for residential purposes for builders or developers, but they could be built and turned into parks. And as one of the consequences of higher density will be most likely less green space, less permeable surfaces, having dotted around the village lots that are devoted to parkland will not only be delightful for the residents, but could do something for water runoff, for trees, capture the water. So it's something to think about. Get it thinking over there, may come up at some point in the future. There's nothing on the agenda right now. First time I put it out there, although Michael.
I am gonna say something.
Is that Gene?
Never mind, muted. I think it was a mistake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, wait a minute. Yes, it's me. Hi.
Okay.
You recognize his voice any place, right?
Yes, right.
Oh, yeah, I know. Let me, okay, here I am. Here's my husband sitting next to me. Okay.
Hi, Bill.
Arthur,
Yes, ma'am.
that's a brilliant idea. Why have none of these other jurisdictions, Chevy Chase, we got money? You wanna bite us? No, watch us bite you. We'll take it and we'll buy these lands and we'll create open space. I love it. So you know what? You got my vote. It is,
Okay, well,
Bill,
thank you.
and actually, I think I heard Bill say, sitting right next to me, this is brilliant. I think that's what he said. Bill,
It is.
you want to speak for it? Okay.
Gene, I have to remind you, but some years ago,
Yeah.
many years ago, and when I was first on the council, a lot came up that was suggested that we do this, and I was completely against it at the time.
Uh-oh.
I have had time to reconsider, and now I thought that was an opportunity that was lost.
Well, you're forgiven. And
Okay.
will you admit to which lot it was that you thought we shouldn't?
Yeah, I'd
Could it
rather
be
not.
Cummings Lane, perhaps?
No.
No. Oh,
No,
okay.
but it was it was a problem lot.
Oh, okay,
We
okay.
have,
Mm,
okay, we
yeah.
have some other,
Anyway, it's a great idea. You got my vote, buddy, okay?
You
Dog
speak the
park,
truth. Go ahead.
all kinds of opportunities.
Larry, did you have a comment?
Wait, if people are making comments in the room, they can't hear you online unless you get up here.
Yeah,
So,
okay. So, Arthur, nice idea. But what is 5,900,000 when you take our operating budget? It's
Mhm.
2.5 houses in Martin's Additions. That's what you're gonna buy if you're lucky. And you've decimated our money for our infrastructure. And Jeff, you know this, that the only way we're gonna change this is we have the non-existent property tax from Martin's Additions. And we're gonna have to goose that sucker up to huge figures to support the repairs needed for the infrastructure if this housing stuff goes in there. So I don't think that you would be able to do much of what you're suggesting without decimating the stuff. And don't forget that when you're screwing around with zoning, there may be some legal actions and you may need that money.
And I was gonna say, if it's okay, Larry, just to respond to that, so again, not everyone has looked or goes through the treasurer report, but one of the bullets under the follow-up, there's a very specific action to follow up with, accounting and financial advisors on what some forecasting might be specific to the impact on the budget. So with the very specific notion that you just mentioned, that we won't be caught uninformed, but as you share, where would the next bucket come from? And right now, our income tax is effectively zero. It's the lowest rate, I believe, property tax, I'm sorry. And yeah, we'd have to look at how to make that up. So, yeah, good point.
Who saved the seat?
Yes.
Thank you.
The big zipper.
All right, thank you.
That's everybody.
Good,
All right.
nice to see you.
Glad you
Welcome.
came.
Yes.
The council welcomes you.
Yes, welcome. Yes. Are there any other comments? If not, I'm going to way to make an entrance, Mr. Elrich. Thank you. This evening, we are honored to be joined by the Honorable Mark Elrich. He is the Montgomery County Executive, first elected in 2018. And he previously served 3 terms on the Montgomery County Council as in at-large members. He also served as a council member on the Tacoma Park City Council from 1987 to 2006. And for 17 years, he was a Montgomery County Public Schools teacher. That is quite a list of accomplishments and service to Montgomery County. And I think we should applaud you for that. So, Mr. Elrich.
Follows Martin's Addition resident Neil Potter, who had been executive.
Who
was a really good friend.
And neighbor.
Well, welcome and to the Village of Martin's Additions. For a bit of context and background, the Village of Martin's Additions became a municipality in 1985 when a village-wide referendum for Martin's Additions residents resulted in 92% voting in favor of incorporation. And this March, we will be celebrating our 40th anniversary as a municipality. And in our history, I believe you are the first Montgomery County executive to attend our council meeting. But now you're telling me maybe Neil Potter. But anyway, you were supposed to make history tonight. But we have had, previous county executives attend our community social functions, which of course you're always cordially invited to. But we have yet to have the presence of your office participate at our very local level of government. And so we sincerely thank you for accepting our invitation to attend tonight and to address and hear from our residents. I believe I can speak for most residents in the room and on the Zoom when I say the growing concerns about attainable housing strategies initiatives. Several of our residents who are here tonight and on the Zoom attended the 5 listening sessions hosted by Montgomery County Council President Andrew Friedson and Planning Director Jason Sartori. At our VMA Council meeting last month, housing planner Lisa Gavoni of Montgomery Planning presented the planning board's recommendations and what attainable housing strategies could look like here in the VMA. And she graciously answered resident questions and listened to our concerns. And our council also recently voted to include our municipality's signature on a letter signed by several neighboring municipalities to the state senator and state delegation requesting a technical amendment to the state code 20-509. I hope I said that correctly. Well, the amendment seeks to confirm that municipalities have the authority to regulate all residential housing types within their corporate boundaries without impeding any specific housing type. So as chair, I'm Katie Filipczyk Howard. Nice to meet you. I have attended several meetings over the course of the last 2 months with other local municipal leaders and Montgomery County Council members. And while county council members have said there's currently no attainable housing legislation before them, it would be helpful to our community to hear your thoughts and perspective about the current plan and the potential legislative process, and what, as a municipality, should we consider doing next? So, Mr. Elrich, once again, thank you for your presence tonight. We're interested to hear what you're working on and about the current issues. Welcome to the Village of Martins Editions. The floor is yours.
Great. Do you want me to sit here or stand up?
Where are you more
Wherever you
comfortable?
are comfortable. Yes.
We can pivot our,
Okay.
Where to begin? Just for a starter from my background, I started doing community organizing, and particularly around zoning and development issues back in the early 80s. I was involved in the big fight in Silver Spring over the mega mall they were going to build there. I learned all about traffic, and so I was one of the few citizens who actually could analyze a traffic plan, look at a zoning plan, and tell you what was going to happen. Because a lot of citizens were too intimidated by that process, and so I learned how to do that when we were fighting the Silver Spring stuff. And so over the years, I would help other community groups around the county who wanted to know, what's this going to do? What's the impact going to be like? I'm a big believer in the adequate public facilities ordinance, and that's relevant here because the council, starting when I was on the council, basically began changing what it was. The adequate public facilities ordinance was meant to ensure development did not occur, that transportation, schools, and other critical services. And that's why they call it the adequate public facilities ordinance. Starting toward the end of, I guess, my last 2 terms, once Marilyn Praisner died and the balance on the council shifted, they started renaming this stuff. And they took any reference to adequate public facilities out of it deliberately, because they don't want residents to have an expectation of adequate public facilities. Because if you question the project and you said, well, you're not accommodating traffic or what's going to happen to our schools, and you reference the adequate public facilities, people assumed you'd have the right to that, and the council wanted to disabuse you of that notion. I'm being blunt, but I served with those people, and I wasn't confused about what was going on. And this plan kind of takes this, along with Thrive, to a level we've never been at before. They don't count for adequate facilities for anything, there's no analysis of traffic, there's no analysis of the environmental impacts. We're very concerned about stormwater because we know we're already seeing floods because it's overwhelmed our system, which was built long before this level of rain. And to not take that into account is a real serious problem. They don't look at schools. One of the planning board members said, because they've heard my criticism, and they said, well, that's wrong. We consider the APFO. That is flat out not true because you don't know where the development's going to go. Unlike planned development, where they're going to zone these many acres and these many housing units, you need roads this wide, you got to accommodate service. You don't know where these houses are going to pop up. You have no way of meaningfully measuring it. And then the other thing that I thought was really disingenuous, and these are the things they say to citizen groups, is that, and when we do development, we get facilities. You get facilities when there's a planned development of a project. If I was redesigning a shopping center, I'm gonna put housing on a shopping center. You look at the entrances and exits to the shopping center. You'd make sure you had accommodations to take stormwater off before you dump it all into the street. We require a lot of on-site storage of stormwater now rather than letting it go up. All those things are normal things. It doesn't happen in one by one development. You're not going to make somebody who builds a large house on a corner right in the street, put in a sewer that not only has to convey their water, but it's got to convey their water through pipes downstream that are too small to hold the volume they're throwing in there. So there is no APFO review. You've got one planning board member, I think it's Justin, who told people, I spoke from the planning board chair and said, developers, you don't need to go to citizens. I don't know why he's on the planning board. I don't know why the council doesn't remove him. Because the whole point of having citizens on the planning board was to get a citizen perspective on this, not to have somebody else who's, as he said, if a developer wants to build 150 units, we should just let him build 150 units. I don't need a planning board for that. I just need a rubber stamp. I waste everybody's time having a planning board. So that's sort of the nexus of this. Thrive was the other thing. Thrive set the stage for this. This bill was supposed to come over with Thrive. And Hans and them talked about it. They were going to do these two bills together. When residents realized what Thrive was going to mean, which is basically what they did with this proposal, they decided they would separate the two. Separating the two technically didn't change the fact they were planning to go together. So they separated them. 1 year they did Thrive, and then they came back and they introduced this attainable housing. And the other disturbing thing I'll say is the county's role in Thrive. I don't have any veto because I would have had veto, I would have used it. We had to provide the financial estimates for the cost of infrastructure. We provided them, and Hans and Casey literally said, we don't believe them. That was the end of the discussion. No counter analysis, no rebuttal to the points our people raised, just simply, we don't believe it, so we don't have to deal with it. I don't live in a world where I can just simply dismiss things that are presented and say, I don't believe them, so I'm not worried about it. And that's how we got where we are today. So you've got this proposal coming over. And a lot of the underlying information or justifications for it aren't true. It started out as affordable housing. Enough of us raised the point that there will be no affordable housing. Their own studies, they did a study in East Silver Spring, and the study said that any housing built here will be as expensive or more expensive than the existing single-family homes. So if you were trying to get housing for your kid who just graduated college and is 21 years old and has a startup job, you're not going to be buying $800, $900 million homes unless your parents are paying for it. But you're not paying for it out of your income, and it's not affordable. So when they realized they couldn't say that, they shifted. What is the first one was affordable housing, then it was missing middle. But it's the same problem with missing middle. The missing middle was supposed to deal with incomes between the high end and the low end. And if it didn't pass muster for affordable, you're never going to get affordable housing. You also weren't going to get middle housing. And so they came up with attainable housing. That's people, so people can attain housing. Yes, some people will be able to attain this housing. Most people in Montgomery County won't be able to attain this housing. The minority population, Black and brown population in Montgomery County makes about 53% of area median income. That's their median income. It's 53% of white and Asian area median income. They're not ever going into these neighborhoods or these buildings. And this is pretty deliberate, much as the zoning of Bethesda for all high rises is like a new form of segregation, because the cost of high rises, you can't afford, most normal middle class people can't afford to pay $7,000 a month for a 3-bedroom apartment. That's, yeah, it's kind of out of sight. So they're basically, I think, doing things pretty deliberately to make sure they remove people. I live in Tacoma Park. They rezoned Maple Avenue, which is where we have all this affordable housing. We would just lose half the affordable housing in Tacoma Park on Maple Avenue because of the rezoning they did. They have begun talking about looking at neighborhoods closer to the downtowns, but not right in the downtowns, and bemoaning the concentration of poverty. Well, the folks who lived there moved into the older apartments when white people like me and my friends moved out after college. As new housing got built and as white incomes got higher, people were able to have more mobility. The older units were left behind, and so you see the older parts of Montgomery County now have very high minority populations. The other consequence of that is that landlords had to take care of property when rent tenants could vote with their feet. Right? Because if you didn't like your landlord, too high a rent or too bad conditions, you can move. For low-income people, you don't have a choice because there's not any affordable housing in this county to move to. So they've also allowed the housing quality to deteriorate. Park Planning has no interest in this. And on the front page of their document for this plan, they ask themselves the question, is this about affordable housing? I don't know why they'd be dumb enough to do that, put it on the front page, but they said, no, it's about market rate housing, not about affordable housing. The biggest problem in Montgomery County is the lack of affordable housing. 50,000 households under $50,000 in income who cannot find a place to live here, who double up or live in really, unsuitable housing. That is not a problem that Park and Planning wants to address. This is all focused on high-end luxury housing, and that's not going to help any of us. Most recently, a developer in Pike and Rose who had approval for three towers, 2,000 units, came to us and said, look, there's no market for 3 towers, which is true. He said, so I want to lower my buildings and do 1,000-unit development, and the county can buy half of it. Park and Planning's fighting him, saying, we want you to build the towers. Even though the developer's saying there's no market for it, they're insisting that he build towers rather than build affordable housing. And the good thing about that is not only do I get the lower end of affordable housing, but I get what you would normally call the missing middle, because his project, because it's not high-rise, would serve a much broader range of incomes than the high-rises serve. The Park and Planning is not even interested in things like that. So what you're dealing with, I think, because I know some of the people on the planning board, they consider themselves new urbanists and they hate suburbs. That's what they think. They think this is bad and evil. They'll tell you that this is how the county got segregated. So I got curious about that. So I pulled up population data from 1870 to the present. And I discovered that in 1870, the Black population of Montgomery County was 30%. By 1960, it declined to 3.3%. But think about it. They lived in these rural areas where they were able to buy land and stay rural. We had no city in Montgomery County, so there's no urban poverty in Montgomery County historically, because there was no city that got old and, deteriorated. So they lived in these scattered sites around the county. They could not buy land in Montgomery County, and they couldn't rent property in Montgomery County. So if they didn't buy some of the places around the farms where they've been slaves, there weren't many places to go. So as they aged, think about this, you got kids, you can only divide your property into so many small lots before they're not productive anymore. So most Black people wind up leaving Montgomery County. If the kids got to college, they went someplace else because nobody would hire you in Montgomery County. And you couldn't rent an apartment here or a house here, and you could not move it. You couldn't buy a house in Montgomery County. But the problem wasn't single family zoning, which Andrew and others, single family zoning is the thing that did it. It was the covenants on all the property. All the property in Montgomery County had covenants that excluded Blacks, usually Jews, and occasionally Catholics. So if you were any of those three, well, particularly the first 2 groups, you could not get into Montgomery County. And so Blacks had no future here. They couldn't work here, and they couldn't get housing here, which is why you see this percentage shrink. The fair housing laws are passed in the mid-1960s. By 1970, the population has started going up, and today the population's back to about 21% of Montgomery County's population, because as soon as they were allowed to buy houses or rent any place in Montgomery County, people came here to live just like my family did, which moved from DC in 1960. So the stories they tell about why we need to do this, just start out being patently false. Then there's the data they use. And you guys know about the data, the assumptions they make about this house. You've heard them talk about a housing crisis, shortage, whatever. It's my favorite thing. So when I was on the council, I was on COG and I served on the Transportation Planning Board. And so all of these forecasts for growth and development in the county went through that board. And the process was that they do these forecasts. They're called rounds. Right now we're in round 10. The last round was 9.2. A few years before that, it was 9. And all of the planning directors in the entire region who are members of COG work with their staff to estimate how much of the zoned property in Montgomery County will be built in 5-year intervals over 30 years. So round 9.2, which came out in 2015, had projections all the way out to 2045. And round 10.0, which is the round we're in now, has projections out to 2050, which is normal, to 2020 to 2050. It is done by an analysis of all the zoning you put in place, and then the planning staff estimates how many housing units will be built and need to be built. The driver is usually jobs, because people won't move to a place for housing if there aren't jobs there. And so what you need is you look for job growth to drive the housing growth. This is the only thing me and David Blair agreed on in the last election, was that population drives housing, not the other way around. And that was the way they did their forecasts. Employment. I said, you're right. Employment drives the housing growth. So a couple of years after they do around 9.0, they do a revision of 9.2. And then somebody looks at the numbers and they think that there's an imbalance between jobs and housing. And that for the jobs they're projecting, they need to build more housing. Then they called it a target. The normal thing for COG to do would have been to do a revision, say around 9.3, and to say we now estimating more housing growth because we're estimating more jobs in the county. That made sense. If they had done that, I would have been, okay, I get the bigger number. But it's never been called a target before. And we were assigned targets to build, in our case, 10,000 additional units above the 30,000 units that we were originally planned to build. And I had questions about it. Part of it was they assumed Montgomery County, they gave us the highest percentage of low-income housing because they assumed our wages were different. We were the only jurisdiction that already was at $15 an hour as a target. And right now we're at $17. They projected us as lower incomes, which projects a lower income population. But actually, we were going to have the highest incomes in the county. And so they missed that, which I thought was troubling. And the 10,000 didn't make sense the way they did it, because what you would normally do, since this is already based on existing zoning, and I tell you 5-year increments, none of that is tied to time, in the sense that this is not scheduled to be built in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years from now. It's their estimate that only so many units will be built in 5 years. And then in the next 5 years, so many more units. The units could be anywhere in the county, and there's no reason. So all they had to do was do a revision, say we're doing 9.3, and say we're going to pull forward 10,000 housing units from the outer years, because there will be demand, and demand will cause them to be built, which is the normal way things happen. They didn't do that. Instead they said, this is your target. And they left, and they didn't change the projections. So this got me curious about more than just that. So what else could I find in their numbers? First thing I found was when they did round 10.0, which I think came out in 22 or 23, the number for 2030 was back to 30,000 units. The 10,000 units they said were your target weren't added into the 2030 number. So the number stays at 30,000 units. So if there's a crisis and we have to build 10,000 extra units, and then 3 years later, you're telling me, actually, the number is 30,000, not 40,000. I thought something was seriously wrong with that. And that led me to do, the next thing was actually to look at all their job and employment, housing, and population numbers. And what I found consistently is they are projecting a drop in 46,000 jobs in Montgomery County. Drop. 46 fewer than they're projecting. So if you're losing 46,000 jobs, you hardly have a crisis of housing units because you're actually going to have fewer people here needing housing than what you projected. I expected to see the 10,000 added to 30. It wasn't there. I thought there would be a normal growth pattern, but instead I see a reduction in housing units and further then in jobs and then reductions in housing units in the out years. And that's why I brought this, which is kind of a condensed view of a comparison of round 9 to round 10, their projections for jobs, housing, and population. And I told Artie, who's the planning board chair, I said, you know, you make this really easy because I only use your numbers and I use your quotes. So when you say there's no affordable housing, I use that. And when your numbers say the population's going down, I use that. And if you add all this stuff up, it doesn't make any sense. My interpretation of what's happened is that basically you have these very extreme people on the planning board who don't like, as I said before, the suburban fabric. They decided to say, my God, there's this horrible housing crisis and we must build more housing. And then suddenly everybody's echoing. It's almost like a Fox News echo chamber where everybody takes the same lines and says the same thing. Andrew talks about a moratorium and how great it was we lifted the moratorium. Moratoriums were in place because we weren't building the infrastructure. The only places that went into moratorium is if you failed traffic tests or school tests. Lifting the moratorium could have been done anytime the county council decided to fund schools and transportation. That's the way you get rid of moratoriums. They just got rid of moratoriums by saying we're not going to do them anymore. And they did not correspondingly take on policies that would increase the amount of money available for transportation or for schools. So they claim that they did everybody a favor by getting rid of moratoriums. They actually did you a disservice. With moratoriums, the housing and roads used to be paid for by developers. If we get developer money, things would get built. You had orderly development in the county. The farther you move away from that nexus between developers and paying for infrastructure, the more the cost of that lands on you and not on developers. And because people don't want to raise taxes on you in general, we wind up with nothing. Because if you're waiting for somebody else to pay for it and they don't, and you decided you're not going to raise taxes to pay for it, then you let the growth go on without building the corresponding infrastructure. We've been in this box for a very, very long time. Montgomery County job growth has been mostly flat over a 20-year period, if not longer. We struggle because we don't build infrastructure. And I've got a proposal to change the tax structure in Montgomery County to shift more of the burden onto commercial property and lighten the burden somewhat on residential property, because that's what they did in Virginia in 2012. Virginia was kind of stuck like we were, and they had Tyson's Corner, massive amount of land, but just another shopping center. It's not like it wasn't a very exciting place. Maybe they had bigger stores than we did. They had two shopping centers across from each other. We've never done that, but that's what they had. They passed a series of taxes in Northern Virginia, and the developers ask for the taxes. And they go down to the state legislature with a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, the developers ask them to give the Northern Virginia counties the right to put in a differential tax on commercial property so they could build the infrastructure, which they knew would lead to economic development and bring people and companies back into Fairfax County. And that was backed up by all these studies people were doing that says transportation is the primary inhibitor of economic development. If you can't move people, then people don't want to go there. So Fairfax puts these taxes in place. Fairfax County explodes, Montgomery County refuses to do anything with taxes. And we sit here and we're not able to move the needle. We've got the red line, but red line's basically designed to ferry people into the District of Columbia. It is not a Montgomery County interconnection. There is no east-west in this line, and there's only one north-south on each side of the county. So we don't have a proper transportation system. So I've been pushing to do that. But my point in all this is that people went on a different path than we did. And we made a mistake staying on the path we're on now. When you think about what Thrive, what this, not Thrive, well, Thrive's going to do, would do this, but this is what this plan is going to do. You're going to wind up with a greater need for infrastructure with no means to pay for it. Unless somebody gets tired of it and says, well, you have to tax residents, and that's not out of the question. I don't know how you rezone the county without consulting the residents. I mean, people buy homes because they like the neighborhood. Everybody I know will tell you how long they looked for a home to be in a place they wanted to live. They like the trees, they like the quiet, they like whatever it is about these neighborhoods. They didn't want to live in an urban area, and they didn't want to live in townhouses. They wanted to live in this environment. And to just say we're going to rezone 80%, is it 80% or 82%? 82% of the single family homes in Montgomery County, we're going to rezone it without consulting with the people who live there, without asking them, how is this going to affect your quality of life? They dismiss, if you talk about quality of life, they just dismiss it. If you talk about traffic, they dismiss it. If you talk about parking, and there are plenty of neighborhoods around there who could not afford to have 3 or 4 houses on a block converted to quads. If they're going to be quads with 4 cars for every quad, you're not going to be able to park in your streets. And it's going to be, and in the view of park and planning, and so far the council, there's no problem with that. You're bad people and you're privileged and you live in single family neighborhoods. And, you know, that's just not the wave of the future. It is, I think, incredibly disrespectful of people who live in communities to say we're going to rezone everything without talking to you about it. The other thing which I just started realizing was they've approved a bunch of housing developments, major developments. They don't require this housing in these places. No. No.
You know what?
They don't require this kind of housing in the places they're rezoning because they're empty. And I'm not recommending going into Potomac or Falls Road, but they recommend nothing on Falls Road and Potomac, but they go up to Boyd's and say Boyd's has a train which only runs in the morning into DC and runs in the evening out of DC. There is no back and forth service all day long. And they target Boyd's for this because it's got a train. The Falls Road is, you know, it's a 2-lane road, but if you don't care about infrastructure costs, you can make it a 4-lane road and we can run bus service over there. I could run bus service into Potomac. The idea, you know, it's no surprise what got left out of their planning. But the scary thing is when they're doing like in Viva White Oak, which is scheduled for thousands of housing units, instead of planning, you know, neighborhoods with quads, triplexes, and duplexes, it's pretty much going to look like a typical Montgomery County development. And I feel that, you know, if you're going to build this housing, you can either go into residential neighborhoods, or you can tell developers who have these master plans that have not been out, that we're going to relook at these master plans because you haven't built them yet, and make changes to make sure we have the housing type that you say everybody needs. And you could require it in these places without displacing anybody because it hasn't been developed yet. These are shopping centers that are eventually going to become these bigger developments. So instead of saying that's where we should put the housing, because this is what people want, they don't do that over there, and they focus on the residential neighborhood. And that's pretty simple. It's because it's easier to do this to you than it is to do to developers, because developers will spend a lot of money on campaigns. I have experience with this. I think between my last 2 elections, about $20 million was spent to keep me out of office. So I know what money's like, and most of it is from developers. So they don't want to mess with people who are bread and butter for them. They'll mess with you. And it's like just another aspect of how unfair this whole process has been. if they really wanted to do this, they'd relook, even in Bethesda, instead of going from one end to the other with high rises, they would keep the high rises tented around the metro. And they'd use a proper, you know what a walk shed is? Walk shed is an expression, it's how far people will walk
Right.
to either a job or to housing. People will walk a half mile to home, they'll walk a quarter mile to a job, and it is not as the crow flies, it's as you walk. And so you're not flying over all these buildings between you and your destination. You have to make right turns, left turns, you have to wait for traffic lights and all that stuff. Our complaining, unique to anybody in the country that we can find, is the side of the walk shed is a mile.
In a straight line.
In a straight line. They know this is not normal practice. I'm not saying anything that everybody doesn't know. Well, MATA will tell you that the walk shed around a metro station is a half mile. Our complaining event's a new number, which justifies them pushing out to a greater extent, and they just say, well, people will do this. I don't know anybody who's walking through a grocery store in Monterey. I'm sorry, that's not happening. I wouldn't even do that when I was healthy and younger. That was not really something I would go out and do. So there's a real inconsistency pretty much in everything that they've put out there. And it's really concerning. This thing needs to be killed. There is no compromise. And they need, if it was me, I would replace the planning board. Because I don't need a bunch of ideologues on there who think you're the enemy because you live in a single family home. I need people who will follow planning principles rather than their belief system. You know, I know about ideology. I'm pretty progressive. I know I'm not a left, but I also live in the real world. And, you know, you're limited to what you can do by the constraints of the real world. They need to be limited by the constraints of the real world too. They can't use their imaginations and say, this is evil, we're going to get rid of it. And I don't know what they think they're going to get different since the housing is so expensive. They're not going to integrate the neighborhoods. If race was an issue for them, this doesn't solve that problem. And it doesn't solve the problem of missing middle because it's too high priced for missing middle, and it doesn't address affordable housing. There are a few developers who are deprived in the county because we are running out of greenfields. You know, you're not going to do many multi-acre developments. The project in Viva White Oak is 300 acres, but it's an old sand and gravel pit that's being repurposed. We're doing a 500-acre development up in Emery Grove because there's a lot of county land and some other land up there we can get access to. It's a restoration of an historic Black community that got booted out in urban removal in the 70s, and we're going to go back in working with HOC and others to rebuild the community over there. We have, if Park and Planning backs down and lets Richie Cohen build his project, we'll be doing 1,000 units over there at the back of Pike and Rose. So I'm not against building housing, and I will build as much of it as we can build, but truth is nobody's going to build something there's not demand. Park and Plan is, you know, they did a White Flint study. Anybody know they did a White Flint study? They asked the developers, why aren't you building?
Yeah.
Because how many years ago did we rezone White Flint? Right. Millions of square feet of development we're supposed to get. The developers said, we're not building because there's no market. We can't get rents at the level we want rents. And so they're not building. That's another park and planning problem that goes back to zoning. If I rezone your property for high rise, the value of your property goes up. But it's based on the zone potential build out. So if you got what was used to be the zone C2, where you could have maybe a 2-story building that covered most of the lot, you only have so many square feet. If you can build 20 stories, or in Silver Spring, they approved they planned a 30-story building, you get a lot more density off the same square footage of a lot. That makes that lot a lot more valuable, which drives up the cost. So now you've paid a lot of money for a lot that you can build a high rise on. And then you discover there's no demand for the high rise. If I build what I could sell now, when you build the smaller building, it doesn't pencil out as well because you pay too much for the land. So these guys are sitting on this property. White Flint is sitting on thousands of units that could be built tomorrow if Park and Planning hadn't zoned all this stuff for high rise. It's just, we shoot ourselves in the foot when we do this. The obsession with it as a housing type does not get us the kind of mix of housing that we really need. And it's frustrating for me to deal with them. I offered to meet with the planning board in the summer. They want to meet with me. They have a committee that was looking at, I call it the growth and infrastructure policy, what used to be the Adequate Public Facilities. I said, before you recommend, because what they wound up recommending was further reduction of developer payments for development in Montgomery County and inclusion in the no payment area, another swath of properties in Montgomery County. This is what they sent over to the council. The council will probably decide this next week. I said, can I meet with you? Can I talk about, let's do what they do in Virginia. This is obviously not working. And I was told they didn't want to meet with me. So they didn't meet with me. This is no way to have a planning board. And it's not going to serve us well. And if we have to go through continual fights over this nonsense, it's going to be a problem. If you've got members who feel like, you know, they're really mad at me, they're going to be mad at you. But if you thwart them, they're not going to go away quietly. They will continue to try to come back at this. So anyway, we've done a lot of research on my staff. I've got Debbie's one of my staff members, but Meredith Wellington is on my staff. She used to be on the planning board. Before I had Meredith, I had Pierre. Pierre was the deputy director of the planning board. I have always had planning people on my staff, so I have some vague idea of what I'm doing in an area that I don't start out being familiar with. And so I've had, I think, an advantage that no council members had of being able to work closely with people who actually were in planning in Montgomery County. But these are staff people I have, and it makes a difference. And so Claire Isley, who worked for Marilyn Praisner for years and did a lot of the land use and zoning stuff for Marilyn, works for me. I've got Meredith working for me. So I've got people who actually have the skills and knowledge to kind of assess things. None of them are driven by a particular ideological view of housing. I was asked by a Post reporter, am I opposed to quads, triplexes, and duplex? I said, not on principle. But I said, you could go to DC, in Northwest DC, and you'll find, I grew up on Somerset Street. Somerset Street, the house I was in was a duplex. It also has combinations of single family homes on the street. And there are also parts of that area in Northwest DC. This is by Coolidge High School and Tacoma Metro. There are also small apartment buildings, but everything was built as part of a plan. So if you had an apartment building, you weren't trying to shoe it in to a 6,000 square foot lot or a 9,000 square foot lot. You set out your plan and you said, this is where the apartment building is going to be. We want green around the apartment building so it doesn't butt up against everything else. We don't want things running perpendicular to road, overlooking somebody's backyard. All these housing types were accommodated in the zoning. You need parking. There was either parking out back or there was parking in front. All these decisions are made when you do smart planning, which is why if you wanted to do this to every shopping center in Montgomery County, I could care less. As long as it's planned right, so that somebody would actually want to buy the house and live there, and you have the opportunity to deal with stormwater, the street sizes, make contributions to the schools, all those things, we can manage that. But there's no managing this. There's no ability to raise the money that it's going to take to manage it, and there's no ability to deal with the consequences that are going to come from it. So that's sort of basically how I'm looking at things. And I've been talking to people out in the community. I get a fair bit of flack from it, from the so-called GIMBY crowd. But they never talk about affordable housing. Their idea of this is the other thing about these folks. This is like Koch brothers stuff. Koch brothers' idea is their idea of how to deal with housing in America is go into the urban areas, do exactly what Park and Planning is doing, to raise the prices of the housing, and you will remove the minority population from those areas. And this is their approach to doing this. I feel like can't believe I'm getting this in Montgomery County, but the primary advisor to park and planning, not park and planning, but COG, Council of Governments, they work with the Mercatus Institute. Mercatus Institute's a co-funded foundation. So you're getting stuff that is coming from the ideological right and focused on redoing what's, happened to cities. We're not a city, which is the other thing, we are not a city. We have choices that Minneapolis doesn't have, or that Portland didn't have, and Seattle doesn't have, in that you can still have 90,000 or 100,000 units in your future development plans, which tells you, even though Casey Anderson will say we're, all zoned, just massive amounts of land are zoned for single family homes. That's true, but they're not built, and built is different than zoned for. But if you're in Minneapolis, the place is already largely built out. You will be hard put to find anything in Minneapolis bigger than large parking lots. But you're not going to find expanses of land where the developer can imagine, like in East County at Viva Bueno, he could build 6,000 housing units. Those things are few and far between, but you're not going to find them in Minneapolis. You're not going to find that land vacant in Seattle, because all those places got built out. They are cities that have a history of over 100 years of development, all of which means that they've built everything they can pretty much possibly build. So if I wanted to accommodate more population and more jobs, I probably have to think about it. Montgomery County's not there yet. We have options, and if they're smart about what they do with shopping centers, and I've proposed taking the office parks and which are vacating, and taking the office parks, turning them into townhouse developments, where you could get in decent housing, and they're going for very cheap. And I saw something the other day that was like 25 cents on the dollar from the last sale. In fact, I see multiple properties like that. Those are opportunities for the county to do what these guys want to do, which is build communities that fit that footprint. So they should have at it. I will help them do that. But they don't need to go to you to solve this problem. There are other ways. If there is a problem, there are other ways to solve it. But if you look at the housing data, and there's more than 10 of you, I made 10 copies of my summary sheet. But
We'll make copies.
I'll leave you some. The big takeaways, is this the right one? My difference tables. I was looking at Montgomery County versus Frederick, and we're down, the job projections are 49,000 jobs by 2020. They were off 27,000 jobs. They're off by for 2025, 36,000 jobs. They're off by for 2030. This is the difference between the original projections and what they're projecting now. So if I was a planning board member and I saw these projections, which they should have since they go to them, I would have said, well, I guess we don't have this immediate need to build 20,000 or 10,000 more units. I would have said, we don't have, that pressure is not on us. They won't even talk about this. They won't tell you stuff they know. And so, because I'm difficult, I look for things, which is also clear. If somebody want to answer a question, then you should look. That's usually what happens. So is this helpful to you?
Yeah,
guys?
very.
Yes.
One quick question. You mentioned ideology.
Yeah.
as one thing that's driving it. You also alluded to developer pressure, money.
Mhm.
Does that play in this, or are they just sitting on the sidelines waiting for it to happen?
No, they're not. They're contributing to the term limit thing.
Yeah.
It's like $100 and some thousand from developers, because they can't beat me in an election despite spending millions. So if they can keep me from running again, the best way to do that is just take away my ability to.
And the planning committee, did they influence that, or were they doing it all on their own?
No, the planning committee is influenced by that because they feed, there are multiple types of developers. There are single family developers in the county who do infill. They're the ones that do the McMansions, which also became an excuse. If you're gonna have a McMansion, why not build an apartment building? McMansions are not as big as the apartment buildings they're talking about building. But then there are developers that do the high rise. You get Clark Construction. They're not coming into your neighborhood to do high rises. But there are a few major developers who specialize in townhouses. And the big fields that do townhouses are going away. Like I said, you can't build a 500, unit townhouse development in very many places in Montgomery County. You can do smaller lots. You can do infill, but you're not going to do 500. So your neighborhood has become the next greenfield. And so you can treat it as something that should be more densely developed for the good of the county. Always the good of the county, not for their personal pockets, of course, but for the good of the county. They treat your place like a greenfield, and then they can come in. And things you got to worry about, probably less so here than other parts of the county, but on George Avenue, where most of the single family housing is actually rental. Somebody who gets a green light to build an apartment building, if you assemble it on George Avenue, is going to pay a landlord a lot of money. Right now, they're renting to lower income people. They're getting a rate of return for sure, but somebody's going to dangle millions of dollars in front of them for property. You have a neighborhood in Bethesda on the south side of Bethesda, right above or behind where Silver is.
Yeah.
You know the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay, they were ready to all sell out to a developer. True, they wanted to get rezoned because they were going to sell to a developer who would do massive development. So if you got a developer who's willing to spend that much money, because those were not low income houses, if they're willing to spend that much money to acquire a neighborhood for the density that they would have gotten, imagine what they're going to do in places where the housing is still affordable. They'll spend a lot of money to put property together. And if anybody questions the ability to change the appearance of a Wheaton or an Aspen Hill, just go down into DC. I'd go down 13th Street all the time. That neighborhood, all the way downtown, is completely changed. Totally and completely changed. And it's all outside money coming in, either buying and renting, or it's people coming in and buying houses for themselves and renovating.
Well,
Thank you.
Mr. Elrich, thank you for your remarks. And would you be open to questions from my council colleagues? Yeah, Susan?
Yeah.
Oh, well, before I open it up to the resident comments, which, did anyone on the council?
I kind of asked mine, yeah.
Oh,
but-
yes, you already went.
So we got ideology and we got development.
Big money.
So yes, Arthur's our Alexander, our at-large member, Jeff Lander, our treasurer, Susan Fatty is our secretary. Our vice chair unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. He has an alien family member. He's in Germany, so he's on the next day time. But he sends his thanks for attending tonight. But yeah, if none of you have questions, or would you like to ask something, Susan?
Maybe you've indicated that Animas is just suburban, single family communities at large. Is the planning commission in any way benefiting personally from?
I don't know if they're benefiting, but if they have future political ambitions, they're
Yeah,
benefiting.
that's what I wondered if that's really the.
Who is on the planning commission
So
and how did they get there?
there's a guy named, I think it's Barclay, Sean. He's okay. He's a Republican.
I mean, how many people are there?
So the park and planning, the council appoints them. They have terms, so they don't all come up at the same time. If I had known what I knew about the second guy, I would have vetoed him. They would have overridden me. But Hendrickson and what's his name? You know who he is. He's got longish hair and he's younger. That's what I remember. Anyway, him and Hendricks are the real problems. They're both in this belief that we should build housing everywhere.
How many are there altogether?
5. So you start with 2 of them as a deficit. The chair is Artie Harris. He used to work for Bozzuto. And then he worked for Montgomery Housing Partnership. And every time I talk to him, he tells me about the challenges that developers face. And, that we're being too mean to them. You can see the poverty all of them have experienced. It must be terrible. And then, so you're starting with 3 people who are predisposed on the other side. Mitra used to work in the Parks Department. But she's not differentiating herself on this. There's enormous pressure to conform. I've had planning board members tell me that when they were coming up for reappointment, they were told to shut up and not ask questions, and if they did, they'd recommend to the council not reappoint them.
And the council itself.
Well,
Yeah.
you can figure that out.
I think Jess had a question and then we're gonna open it up to residents if you have time. Yes.
Thanks. And I'll make this brief because I know there's many online and here who'd like to ask questions. But first of all, thank you so much. You probably recognize the voice and face. I've been on some of your listening sessions, and starting off with just, again, thank you so much. And data to me is so important. I mean, here, as you may have heard when you were walking in, I serve as the treasurer, but recognizing the impact this can have on us, on our bottom line, the possibility of what that might mean for tax implications because of what happened, as you know, not long ago, the county council and their look at the impact taxes and how they will gut that or potentially gut that going forward. The other role that I have as a volunteer is I serve as a VP and on the executive board of Silver Creek Medical School. So the idea of, again, where and how, what resources will come for this. But my question is this. So tomorrow, and I share with everyone out there on the call and here, Montgomery County, the council and the planning board. So there's a deadline tomorrow, and if not, it can be shared again. There's a deadline tomorrow to submit feedback through their website. And if your feedback does not go through that official channel, it won't be heard as part of their official report. So one is, no, the deadline is tomorrow at 5 o'clock to submit your feedback. You could be in favor of it. You could, whatever it is. So, but tomorrow is your day. And then as Katie mentioned, we as a council have at the state level are looking to advocate around the all housing types and our authority. And I guess the question might be from the perspective or your perspective, what else? What could we do? Because I think that this is something, there's a lot of questions. You pose and show a lot of data. But also, I think there's frustration because they feel that we've seen them present. There are templates they've already created for us that we probably will have to use if their plan goes through. So people have said to you on your online forums, what's the point? So maybe share how and what is the action here other than listening and feeling a little bit out of the loop on what we could do.
So first place, there are a lot of people like you who are angry. You link up. Jenny Sue Dunner, I'm sure you know Jenny Sue. She's part of a larger civic group. There's another civic organization out there. And they're linking up to push back on this. But I'll be blunt, and I may upset some people because it's political, but I used to go to civic, I still do this. I go to civic meetings and people would say to me, why doesn't the council listen to us? When I was on the council. I'd say, well, A, none of you will run for office and challenge them. None of you participate in political campaigns. None of you donate to candidates. So the council's figured out they can do anything they want and you'll be angry, but you're going to go home quietly and there are no consequences. You need to have consequences. So when we were dealing with 10 Mile Creek and trying to save that stream, it took a local issue, made it a countywide issue. And then the message that came from whether you were in Clarksburg or down in Silver Spring was vote for the master plan and you will not get our votes in these communities. And I took a situation, they were trying to put this there without telling me. They had already arranged a vote on something. And somebody accidentally went in my office and asked me what I thought about it. And I said, about what? So we wound up passing protections for 10 Mile Creek on a 9-0 vote, which is a vote I would have lost 8-1 if the community hadn't gotten involved and fought. In Aspen Hill, there was a proposal to rezone the old Geico facility over there for, they were going to put on everybody's favorite thing, Walmart. And I worked with the community group over there. They started a campaign. Next thing you know, signs sprouted up all over the neighborhood, making it very clear, vote for Walmart is a vote you're not going to get from us. And taking that approach, you have to have consequences. if people don't worry about what you're gonna do, they can do anything. I mean, it's a hard message to put out there, but you're not gonna win everything on reason. And political weight makes a lot of difference, and you ultimately are voters, and when they sense that communities are really angry about things, and if communities are savvy enough to say there are gonna be consequences for what you vote, we're not gonna forget about it. 2 years is within most of our memory abilities. We're gonna know who was where on this issue, and we can find other council members who, will support us. That's the most powerful thing you can do to somebody. Absolutely. But a lot of people like to be nice. And, you do have to get a tad confrontational when you're telling somebody you will not be getting votes. But at the same time, if you're not willing to stand up and be a little bit pleasantly aggressive, then you wind up just losing, and you just confirm to them, if they don't hear you, don't see you, and don't feel the pressure from you, they just conclude that, well, you're actually not going to do anything. And that's important. I was a community organizer. I organized tenants in Tacoma Park. I organized even when I was a council member and brought tenants to protest against the council, even though I was sitting on the council. But it makes a difference. And that's, I'd encourage you to, figure out how you make your voice clear, that this is one of those watershed issues. There is no anything else you can do for me that's going to offset what you're doing to me with this one.
Okay, good.
Do we have
Thank you
any,
so much.
questions from the residents? I'm gonna do,
And there are online too, so just so you know.
Have them come up to this.
oh, could you come up to the podium if you have a question, Larry? And then I'm gonna toggle back and forth between,
Just our own local Martin's Additions issue on this. WSSC is a constant fight between PG and Montgomery County as to where funds go. And WSSC is a bit of a sorry mess when it comes to providing infrastructure. Do you see any, so here would be a situation where we would have more housing suddenly coming into rather than PG County would. PG County's complaint is that all the funds, or most of the funds that go into WSSC get spent in Montgomery County. So how would we exactly overcome that type of thing? Is there any?
I don't think most of the funds get spent in Montgomery County.
Yeah, I don't think so either, but that's,
But what does happen? That, because for years they didn't charge fees properly.
Right.
They're at a point now where much of the system over there is gonna fail. And we're dealing with that.
You're taking over part of it.
We do have part of it.
Yeah.
Tacoma Park took it over flat out. So we weren't under their fee system. But the challenge you face is that they really don't have enough money to replace the infrastructure. And which is because the flooding problem is a real one. We've hired a hydrologist, the team to work on Montgomery County because we realized we can't fix the flooding problems on each individual street without understanding how the water got there and where it's coming from. They're going to issue a report that's going to depress a lot of people because people are going to discover they're in a floodplain and they didn't know they were in a floodplain. We've got an obligation to do this report, and WSSC does not have the wherewithal. They've asked for a 12.5% increase this year. They're not going to get it. I have problems with what they're asking for. If they were telling me they were going to put this money all into people who are going to be on the ground working in the community and getting work done, I feel different about it. I don't see that. I would not fund their automated, expensive collection of data because it was more expensive than having people collecting the data, which is a problem because this is supposed to be software that got read by cars driving down the street rather than meter readers going to each house. So I'm trying to focus them on things that actually make a difference with the dollars they have. I don't think they charge enough on commercial property. So I think we wind up eating some of the cost of building that infrastructure here. But I would not try to strangle them on the money. I mean, we're not going to give them everything they want, but they're gonna need more money and the county's gonna need more money. We're just,
Well, if they can't solve our infrastructure problems, what would happen? Is the county gonna have to step in and provide that expansion?
we're already preparing for that.
Well, you're doing storm drain stuff.
Yeah.
What about sewage and water?
We've got capacity in sewage and water. We're looking at possibly the quarry up in, off of where Shady Grove Road ends, or Trevilla Road ends, Trevilla Quarry. We need a second water supply. Everybody's kind of concluded if we hit drought conditions, we take water from this dam in West Virginia, and it takes days for the water to actually get down here. And we can't afford to be days without water, so we're trying to look at Trevilla to be a backup quarry, or to be a backup water source for the region, so we can fill it up and keep the pipes full. Right now, the way we do it is we take water from, what is it, Great Seneca Creek, or the lake up there. And it's the worst waste of water, but it's the only thing we have. We put so much water in the Potomac River so that the level of the river rises above the intake pipes. Because the reason you get the water supply drops is intake pipes wind up above the water level, and water doesn't go into them. If this were a proper system, instead of flooding the river with water that will never get used, you would pipe directly from the lake into supply lines that go to the treatment place. And that's a lot of money to build the supply lines to go to the treatment place. That's one of the things we're looking to deal with. And I expect that to come on the horizon in the not too distant future.
Well, we may have enough water supply here for what we've got, but
Well,
frankly, they haven't done anything on our fire hydrants in 40 years. They claimed this year they were going to inspect them, flush them, clean them. It said, we had a house burned down here because the fire hydrants failed. And they literally they give us this gassy answers that it's in the budget and they're going to do it. I go around and I check all the fire hydrants and the paint is not broken off where you unscrew the caps. They haven't touched it.
you make a note about that, you can ask about the testing of fire hydrants up here.
Flushing and
Because
testing.
of the failures.
So I'm gonna jump to someone on Zoom who's been waiting, and then I'm gonna jump to you, Lori, and toggle back and forth. Holly Worthington, I see your hands up.
Yes.
Can you come off mute? Okay. Hi, Holly.
Hi, how are you all? I just wanted to say that everything you're saying is right. And I'm in real estate in Montgomery County for over 40 years, and I know what you're talking about. And what you're saying is exactly right. And I'm saying that so other people who haven't been in real estate around here for so long can know that I absolutely agree with everything you've said about jobs, where people want to live, where the vacant land is. And I don't know how we can overturn what may end up being a legislative proposal and stop it. They managed to do that in Arlington, where they were pushing for the same sort of thing, not exactly the same. You probably know more about that than I do, but I just thank you for your help and your leadership. So thank you.
So if the worst thing happens,
Thank you, Holly.
flat out, you organize for the next election and you just work with the community groups around the county and get rid of every council member who votes for it. Period. But
Lori? This is Lori Mitchell. You can come up to the podium. Okay, this is Lori Mitchell.
Hi, Lori Mitchell, nice to meet you. Thank you for coming tonight. I think my comments are going to align with yours, but I also think they expand on yours, and so I hope it'll be helpful to you. I also hope they fall within your definition of pleasantly aggressive. These are the comments I am planning to submit tonight through the portal when I go home. My husband and I are really concerned about the attainable housing proposal and the overall process that's been followed. I've actually participated in one listening session, and I've closely followed several others. Actually, I think I've gone to all of them online, and I've listened to many of the online local municipality listening sessions. From what I've gathered, it seems the Planning Commission was tasked by the County Council to address the missing middle housing shortage, but was not given the prerequisites to consider environmental impact, parking, education constraints, infrastructure limitations, and quality of life. As a result, the planning board has put forth a plan at tremendous tax dollars to all of us that fails to address even the most basic issues and has unnecessarily caused all this division within our community. I take my puppy to the dog park every morning, and instead of talking about the things we would normally talk about, this is all we talk about at the dog park. What's even more disheartening is that despite numerous resident concerns voiced during the listening sessions, the planning board staff repeatedly emphasized that their unanimous vote was final. So, they didn't really care what we had to say. Seems like they put the cart before the horse, that why are they having listening sessions if their vote's already final? It was also concerning to witness the apparent presence of several residents who supposedly supported the plan, who appeared repeatedly at different listening sessions throughout the county. It was the same person handing the mic. So I'm pretty sure she recognized that it was the same person. But, and then at one session, a resident requested that everyone who worked for the county stand up, and half the people in the room rose. To me, that's just some kind of political theater of the worst kind. It's essential our voices are heard and that the planning process takes into account the genuine concerns of the community. And I hope that moving forward, there'll be a lot more transparency and opportunities for meaningful community input and the decision-making process. And thank you for everything you said tonight.
Thank you. It is discouraging that, the listening sessions gave people 2 minutes. What? the hell?
30 seconds.
30 seconds, really?
2 minutes would have been
But apparently they.
an innovation.
Oh,
But,
But
yeah.
the idea that you could make a meaningful comment in 30 seconds about anything that's important is a joke, which tells you they actually had no intention of listening to you. And when the planning board was doing their Thrive hearings, in collusion with the council member, one of my least favorite former council members, they alerted the people who they knew would support them to call in and get slots before anybody else can get slots. And then they filled up the slots, and then they wouldn't expand the time for comment. Because, we only have, what did they spend on these listening sessions? About an hour? Yeah. I spend more time, I'm doing 11 budget sessions around the county. I spend more than an hour doing a budget session. And I extend my time if people are waiting there with questions. It's just like, I don't want to hear you, but I'm going to pretend like I'm hearing you and giving you a chance to be heard, but it's meaningless.
We have a hand on up at home. Elizabeth Goldberg, would you like to ask a question or comment?
Yes, hello, everybody. My name is Jeffrey Goldberg. 8 years ago, I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And I played soccer all my life till 50. And I want Governor Hogan and Jamie Raskin or Jaime to understand that there are 2 football fields here that attract players. And I coach a team called Los Prostaticos, or the old people. And we have players from Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, Brazil, Salvador, even Hawaii, Chile, and southern cone of South America, including Montevideo, Uruguay. So I ask you people to get together and each take a field and build a fence. I don't mean a fence that is extravagant, just so the kids who play don't go rolling off into the street and get killed. We've had a number of accidents. In fact, one day, a Hare Krishna guy showed up and I thought he was the arbitrator. So that tells you how what shape I'm in. And all I want to do is listen to the birds, read my books, do Tai Chi, and think about what it is to hold my grandchildren. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goldberg,
Can
for
I do
your
a quick
comment.
commercial?
Yes,
That's what-
yes,
There
please.
is a referendum issue. Does you know about the ballot question? You guys know about the ballot question?
On the election.
Yeah, it would limit me to 2 terms.
Yeah.
And it's a Republican developer finance thing. You know, if you want to help, we need people to help us get the word out. And to vote no on that, because I don't know what happens, where this would go if I were on the council. There's not another council member who does this kind of work in the community. You won't find it. So I hope you guys can help out on that.
Any other comments in the room? Any questions, comments from residents? Oh, yes, please. Yeah, please. Yeah.
I'm Matt Novak. So I'm a little confused by trying to put together some of the things you said. I just, want to understand. I think what I heard you say is that the projection of the demand for housing is overstated because Montgomery County is losing jobs.
That's the reason, but projections are parking planning's actual projections, not mine.
And the county's losing jobs, which is not a good thing. But then you also said that, part of the reason that they're losing jobs is the cost of infrastructure is not supporting commercial development. And for my business, and I'm in venture capital and other things, I mean, I'm a very happy resident of Martin's Additions. Love my neighbors, love my community. Don't get me wrong.
I like venture capitalists.
But when I look at what Northern Virginia is doing, and I do, and see from every, including friends that are at the director level at the Center for Innovative Technology and you name it, Northern Virginia, I can assure you that commercial property taxes and commercial taxes and fees in general in Northern Virginia are substantially less than they are in Maryland, except for life sciences,
The numbers we have, comes out of a study by DC, but does a comparative study every 2 years. Montgomery County is the cheapest place to develop in the region. Our base tax is $1.04, and add 11 cents to that for the state, so we wind up at $1.15. In Fairfax County, base tax, I think, is $1.12. Every square inch of commercial property pays 12.5 cents on their property tax. So now their base tax for commercial property is $1.25. If you are developing in Tyson's Corner, you add almost 30 cents to that total, so you're at about $1.54. Montgomery County still at $1.04. If you're in the 29 corridor, some of the other places they have special taxing districts, you're paying around $1.40. So Fairfax is way higher than this. And Fairfax has a BPOL tax, which is business license tax. Montgomery does not have any tax on businesses, no taxes. And we do not get a piggyback tax on businesses the way we do on residents. The BPOL tax in Fairfax County brings them $200 million a year, only from businesses. Every business, from the guy in his basement doing accounting for somebody to the largest companies in the area. So we're actually the lowest tax. The only place Maryland is higher is the income tax. But when developers are doing property, they're worried about what are the taxes on their property. So if you're paying $1.54 in Tyson's on your shopping center, on your office building, and you're paying $1.04 in Montgomery County, you should be here. The reason they're not here is Virginia took that money and put these taxes in place deliberately, and the developers asked for it because they knew they would get the transportation that would drive development. We get killed because they can move people and we can't. And I'm happy to share with you the data we've got, because again, not my data, but data from Fairfax County and data from Washington, DC. So, and the governor's now going to propose a reduction in the corporate income tax in the state of Maryland, which he hopes, well, it'll be low enough that it'll be competitive, which would put Montgomery County in a really good position. Also Fairfax County, because they are so dependent on commercial real estate, they're looking at further raising taxes, and there's a discussion now about having income taxes in Fairfax, which they don't have now. They got a car tax, they have a food tax, they got a bunch of taxes we don't have, but they don't have an income tax. They're even looking at considering that. So I promise you, we are not more expensive than to develop in
Well,
Fairfax.
on the commercial side, we're also taking into account, utility taxes and, as you know, data centers, can't work in Montgomery County because the excessive utility taxes and things like that. So, there's different things here, but even on the residential side, income taxes are lower in Northern Virginia, than Montgomery County and the state, certainly.
See, but if you combine all the taxes, that's why you can't use income taxes as the only surrogate. You gotta look at all the taxes.
No, I
you pay
understand.
here and there.
But what I'm saying is that, in general, I mean, I think maybe you need to do a better PR job.
Yes, we do.
Because I would tell you that, within the business community, it's generally accepted that Northern Virginia is less expensive to do business, both for residential development as well as commercial development. Now, some of that may be, different than the B-poll taxes and the commercial property taxes, but the general consensus is. And so my concern is, why are we losing employment?
Because you don't have transportation. Virginia put in place, not only the Silver Line, but every county in Virginia has bus rapid transit planned and getting built. In Arlington County, where they did the metro station there, the county of Arlington put out a bond for $240 million for that station. The bond is underwritten by impact, not the impact tax, by development district taxes, as well as some money from Arlington, but by development district taxes in Arlington. My total bonding capacity in Montgomery County is $280 million. My budget is $7 billion. Arlington's budget is $800 million. They can do that because the developers are paying to build, but the developers don't care because the infrastructure brings them access to jobs and high quality transportation, which is what Montgomery County has not been able to deliver.
But as you know, impact fees are not legal. And
I would get rid of impact fees here, as it replace them with the taxing districts, because the taxing districts work better. It gives, with an impact fee, if everybody in this room were a property owner, I only get an impact fee when you build a building. So you're not all going to build a building at the same time. With the development district, everybody's paying some tax, but you only pay a tax when we float a bond. We can only float bonds for transportation, so nobody has to worry about spending money on schools or healthcare or any of the other nice things. It has to be used for transportation. That's Virginia's rules. We would replicate that. And so we would get a steady stream of money, but I can float a bond against. That's what Arlington could do. Despite having a small county government, they were able to float an enormous bond based on the revenue stream. I can't do that. I can't even fund my schools. In fact, we've kept our bond level for 7 years. So if you're at $280 million at 7 years ago, you're not buying the same stuff today that you bought 7 years ago. So then, because they do these district taxes, any project that you build winds up, transportation project winds up in the district taxes. It stays off the general fund taxes. Residents are protected. They made conscious decision over there not to impose these taxes on residents. But the developers were the advocates for it. And the Republican governor, after they passed the tax bill, wrote an editorial in the Post about how this was going to lead to Northern Virginia's resurgence and massive development in Northern Virginia. He was dead right. If you leave me your email, I will send you some.
I've seen it, and I think part of it too, and that's with this, is that the businesses and the corporations that have asked for those taxes, it doesn't come without the understanding of exactly how those monies are spent.
Yep.
for those projects,
And ours would be
Where-
exactly like that. It's only done.
Which
for
is
a
not the
project.
case with the current impact.
Yes, in fact,
I think you would agree.
impact factors is terrible because not only do you pay them, but there's no guarantee that the money I collect will go to a project
Exactly.
or the buildings.
Okay.
I will fix that.
All right, thank you. We have a resident who's been waiting very patiently at home. I believe you know her. Everyone in Montgomery County seems to know her. Her name is Jean Sperling. And she has a question or a comment. Oh, Jean, is Jean on mute? Oh, you're on mute, Jean. There you go.
Well, it's so nice to see you again. We go back, and I appreciate everything you've said tonight. I'm gonna give you, can they hear me okay? I
Yes.
have a really, anyway, let me start by saying thank you. You are just awesome. What you said tonight was absolutely fantastic. I could not know where to start, but I'm gonna start with one question, beginning and ending. Sir, what do you think we can do? I've followed all the other things that the municipalities around us have done, the calls for making comments, they're due by the deadlines tomorrow, blah, blah. But I worry about, are we all just saying the same damn thing, one after the other? What can we really do to make a difference in what's being said? What can we say? And who should we say it to?
You should say it to the council members.
Okay,
Flat out.
thank you. This is the most important. Tell
You
me,
should blanket- you
who do
should
we
blanket-
turn, who do we turn to and what do we say?
So I could put you in touch with people in my office who could help you, figure out what argument you want to use and how you want to go at it. But at the bigger picture, I would blanket Wisconsin Avenue and Connecticut Avenue with signs. I'd make sure that every house you can get puts up a sign because certain council members who represent this area, including at-large members, would have to contemplate that. It worked in Aspen Hill when they were doing Walmart. The stuff we did with 10 Mile Creek worked. I've seen this work. It is the only strategy that works because it's the best way to send a message that you're not going back if you do this. And people are angry everywhere. You're not, I can go to Wheaton, I can go to Holmes, the East County, they got an earful in the East County. So.
Except, you know what? I'm not angry. I know that everybody's being told they need to respond by the end of this week. What I want to know is, what is it that we should say?
Stop this.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to, because that was my reaction. I thought, well, should I talk to them about all the brilliant things I know about? My basic reaction was, I want to just tell them, would you stop this? And I want to ask you, is that good advice?
Yeah, Saints, look, stop it is good advice. I mean, just.
Okay, thanks.
Stop.
They don't, because they claim they don't have a bill in front of them yet.
Okay, so it's not like we have to do something by December.
But if we say we won't vote for you, if you.
You start that campaign, you get enough people going. You will change votes. They're already worried. There are people, who think this is too hot to touch.
So you've been here tonight and you know that old saying, behind every man is this woman. So it's so true tonight.
Thank you, Jean. And so can we have one more question in the room, all the way in the back? I'm sorry, come on up.
Quick question, does the Arlington overruling with the missing middle bill have any influence in Montgomery County? Or are the council members waiting to see that shake out before?
So it would depend how they structure their own bill.
Oh my God.
So I don't know what they would do. I'm sure they'll go to a lawyer and have the lawyers say, so this is what the judges overturned this.
It was mostly procedural, right?
Yeah, so you look for, but you know, the lack of notice here is certainly procedure.
Right.
You're rezoning the entire county, you think a few meetings where you give somebody, you know, 30 seconds, whatever it is, to have input, no judge is gonna take that as input. And I would just challenge it. But look carefully at what the suit is. I know it's what other procedural violations they went through, but they certainly did everything they could do to keep you out of this process for as long as they could keep you out of the process.
Yeah, I think sewage and infrastructure was another point that the judge considered in his ruling.
Yep. I mean, you could look at the original, the adequate public facilities ordinance and say you haven't addressed any of this. And that you can only address it with a comprehensive plan. You can't address it if you're going to allow house by house decisions for what you built. And again, you can contact our office, you know, Debbie's there. We can leave you with contact information. And like I said, I've got 2 people who are really skilled in planning and working in my office. And nobody else can say that.
Well, if there are
Katie, I have a question. This is Marty. I can't raise my hand, but
Oh,
could I
okay,
ask a
Marty.
question?
If there's no other questions in the room, I was gonna go over to Zoom. This is resident Marty Langland with a question. Thank you, Mr. County Executive. Go ahead, Marty.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Mark, for your outstanding integrity on this issue. I am going to ask you 2 strategic questions. One is, do you think it's possible for residents to get the county council to kick this over into the master plan process rather than handling it as a ZTA? It's totally inappropriate to do something this large as a ZTA. If we got into the master plan process, that would, of course, delay it. You wouldn't stop it, but it would delay it. Is that a strategy that we should pursue?
From my perspective, no. I would say kill it. You don't want to come back, because think about this. It's going to be the same planning board that would do the master plan. And then when projects came in, that would review the projects. We don't need to be doing this. If there was a need that anybody could demonstrate, then you'd say, okay, what do we do? What do we need to do this? But there are so many other solutions. If you're looking for places to build housing that go far beyond what we've zoned today, that you ought to focus on that. And like I said, focus on the places that are zoned but not built out, and go. If this is the housing people need, correct your mistakes in your other master plans and fix it there. You'll get the units you want. And like I said, I will not be an obstacle. It's not a bad idea if you plan it right. I see cities where it works, but trying to shoehorn this stuff in to already built neighborhoods is a really difficult challenge.
You're exactly right. Let me ask you a second strategic
Also,
question.
your analysis was right. I happen to have
Oh,
your paper.
he has your paper in the room, Marty. Your
Oh, well,
paper.
I'm honored, Mark, that it was helpful to you. Being an economist is occasionally useful. But my second question is, does it make sense to, I take your point about signs, and I'm willing to chip in and put signs everywhere we can. Does it make sense to specifically have the villages, the towns, all the places that you know, the community groups are writing letters, and the village of Chevy Chase apparently wrote a letter to the county council saying, hey, stop it. Would it be helpful in your view politically if a whole bunch of the villages wrote a similar letter to the one the village of Chevy Chase just sent today?
You should all do that. We should get you in touch with Jenny Sue or who's running that side of the group. I'll find out who's running this, because Jenny Sue is running or putting together this large coalition. There used to be a citizen coalition in Montgomery County, so all these different associations called SITPAC. And they used to endorse, they were very active in elections. People are realizing they need to get active again. But you start with getting all your municipalities to issue a joint statement on this, and then see who else is willing to jump in. And
Thank you.
We could connect you to people on the East County. I mean, the broader the community the letter comes from, the more effective it is. We can add Alney into this. I mean, we can make it very clear that you got a countywide problem here.
Yeah.
So what?
Thank you, Marty.
What about places like, Chevy Chase at Home or Bethesda at Home, those type of, citizens groups?
Yeah.
Does that help if they send in a comment?
Anybody who sends in a comment, they got to count.
Okay,
And if they represent organizations, they got to figure out, okay, what's the size of this organization?
okay, well, great.
Well, if there are no other questions, Mr. County Executive, thank you again for your time. Just some parting, things on your desk. That's a Takes a Village mug for you from the Village of Martin's Additions. We also have our most recent newsletter and a map of our village. We're more than 320 homes. And we have stormwater issues. We have a stormwater task force that we just created last year. So you're music to our ears. You said that word.
And thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. And we hope to see you in March at our 40th anniversary party. And please take a cookie or a brownie with you too for the road. Oh, good. They're from Levin Bakery. I did not cook.
I thought I copied some stuff, but I didn't copy the right thing here. I'm gonna,
Send us something.
I will send you something.
We can
Because these things aren't even collated.
Okay, we'll
So
get it distributed.
I'll get the stuff back to you and,
Well, I'll post anything you want to present.
We can do that too. Yes, yes,
we
yeah.
can say we have a really good summary. Like I say as well.
Everyone online, just bear with us 1 minute. We're gonna go on mute.
You put something in your weekly.
Yeah.
wrap up. Get
order.
back to work.
We are returning from our brief pause. Thank you for those at home still with us.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Jeff, my apologies if I cut you off during the treasurer's report. Were you and Arthur concluded? Because
Right.
our guests came in and I don't know if you were finished.
Yeah,
I
think we were
think
done.
you were concluded,
Yeah.
right? Okay. But then,
We're good.
Yeah.
oh, okay. So next we're going to do,
One thing, but Katie, before we move on, I know we're.
yes,
Just, wait, Tom.
yeah, please.
I did want to ask something
Yes.
and, this is not putting pressure. Because I know that the council has been very thoughtful on this and having this conversation has been extraordinary. One thing I did want to, put on the table is we know there's a deadline tomorrow.
Right. Mhm.
And is there anything that we feel that we could submit, should we? And again, I leave that open to my fellow council members. That is innocuous enough, but at least puts us on record. And again, there may be, and I know Ron is here and this might be something that we have to take offline, but it's more of just the spirit of, do we feel that we could come to some conclusion that we have a template? I'm not saying it's the one we would use, but was it Village of Chevy Chase? I'm sorry, it was a Chevy Chase Village had submitted something that clearly they may have been working on, but I just wanted to ask, does it make sense? Even if it's the idea that we need more information around some of these critical pieces around infrastructure, so on and so forth. But let me pose that. If we feel that we have something or some way, or even a statement that says we support what was submitted and we would appreciate addressing the questions that are within or something.
That's fine. I mean, we're gonna close out the attainable housing in a moment, but thank you for mentioning that letter. We just received this letter, and did you all, Arthur and Susan, did you see the Chevy Chase Village letter? At this point, a letter from our municipality would have to be, by the council. We'd have to construct it. It can't be on behalf of the residents. We'd have to say something on behalf, and we haven't received official, documented feedback from a majority of the residents, but the Chevy Chase Village wording is correct in that they said they were just speaking for their board. I'm wondering about this deadline tomorrow. If we write a letter, does we have to hit it by the deadline tomorrow? We could still write a letter
Yeah, we could.
on behalf of our, but
Exactly.
I think it would take some, back and forth
Right.
wordsmithing.
As-
I'm happy for Jeff to run point and construct it, but I think we all need to weigh in and.
Yeah, I agree.
And as Mr.
Albert
Albert said,
The-
broader the letter,
And
better.
yeah, and the deadline is to get into that official.
into the, pool. Yeah. Yeah,
So we could even do a
Yeah.
placeholder,
Yeah.
just saying,
Yeah.
we'd like to go on record as opposing.
we could do that. Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll be submitting a further detailed
Mhm.
submission later.
So are you all suggesting we do that before 5 PM tomorrow, some sort of put together some wording like that?
We could go around, and just agreeing with what Susan is sharing, I think that we could submit something that's like 1 or 2 sentences. And again, we could perhaps, Ron, you're still online, but depending upon how you feel, again, and I want to be very careful, because I'm not sure where everyone sits on this, but it could be language, which is, we will be submitting our detailed response on some concerns or just something that indicates that we have questions and we really want them addressed, and we would submit that tomorrow, because we've been told, frankly, that if it's not submitted by the deadline, they'll ignore it as part of their report. So we could say something that we would expect or appreciate that when we do submit our final whatever, that it is included as part of your consideration for your report. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we have 4 people. I can make a motion that the council adopt a resolution to send to the county council a letter opposing the attainable housing proposals. Details to follow.
Yes, to be supplemented.
Right. So let's make it formal. I will I move that we so submit a letter. And I think we have a second here somewhere.
I'll second.
And we have a second and we can have a vote on it.
All in favor?
All favor of that. So the council has gone on record
Okay.
formally
Mhm.
to send a letter,
Okay.
a short letter.
All right.
Very short.
Who wants to lead the charge? Do you, someone have a template they're ready to go with and we can pass it back and forth tomorrow? Or Ron has,
A brief,
can Ron jump in at
or
this point?
should one of us do it? Ron?
Ron, what would you suggest on that?
Yeah, I can draft a short letter. And what I'm hearing is that the council would take the position that, not yet fully.
It opposes it, but without any other detail, reasons, explanations or anything. Just a
Well,
very
yeah,
short.
there's no, I'm just struggling with how we word it because there's no pending
Right.
legislation. So we could say
Right.
we disagree with the recommendation of planning staff and we would oppose the county council proceeding with any zoning text amendment at this point until more planning is done on the issues of.
I would just say, just period.
Okay.
When we oppose it, period. We don't have to give explanations why
Okay.
or until.
And then we follow up with a letter.
Yeah,
with
and then-
more substance.
Right.
And more pertaining
to
to
follow.
DNA. Okay.
This is like a telegram.
Okay.
Letter to
Just to
follow.
get ourselves in there by
Right,
the 5
yes,
PM.
right, get us
deadline.
on the record.
Yeah.
And not to be too prescriptive or in the weeds, but one thing, we don't exactly know how they may propose this going forward. So we may want to be a little careful about being too succinct or specific about a ZTA. And just the idea of moving, yeah, Ron, you have your brilliance. I just want to put that out there.
Mhm.
And then, as Susan mentioned, without prolonging this, is we might want to include a sentence that we are doing a more detailed,
Details.
we will provide a more detailed technical submission of our concerns at a later date or something.
Because we can talk about the more, the stormwater,
Right.
our own concerns, but we could at least, do you think we have time to? Is everyone gonna be available tomorrow, via email to back and forth and eyeball a draft? Okay, Ron, is that okay? Or,
Yes.
you're available tomorrow? Okay, I just want to check with everybody. I'm a journalist. I like a deadline. I can work with a deadline. I will be in the mountains on a college visit with my daughter, but hopefully I'll have Wi-Fi and I can get back, but I trust you all and we'll work we'll work it out, okay?
And our goal is, and again, not to sound, but like 3 sentences or less,
Right.
just something that is very succinct and not too, yeah.
Right.
Short and to the point. Okay, all right, I think we can get that together. Just, is that okay on your
Good.
agenda? Okay.
Okay.
Well, on that note, then let's go on to the manager's report.
Katie,
you're
where's
ready.
this stuff from?
Oh, that's from Levin Bakery.
Oh.
You like it? It's in
Yeah, very
Bethesda.
nice.
Yeah, good cookie.
I saw the executive took about 3 of them.
I mean, that's like his own
Those are
work.
just
It's not
discovered
like
cookies.
dinner.
Okay, so for the manager's report, I'm going to keep this really short. I did include in the packet for today's meeting the updated administrative calendar, putting a little check mark next to the things we have completed. And 2 updates since everyone saw this last, and the council should have the original administrative calendar in their binders. The 2 updates are the University of Maryland Research and Government Services Center is drafting our agenda, our annual survey as we speak. And we should have a draft to review and either remove some of the old questions that don't matter anymore, edit some of the questions, or even add some more. And they will be hosting the actual survey. And so that process is coming. It's moved back a little bit because now they're doing it, but we're looking at sending it out in November. So that's coming in the very short notice.
Magnificent, Michael, just very quickly, I think you already confirmed this at a prior meeting, but when there's a draft or something, we'll have a chance to input those items because I do think that we agree that it would be very timely for us to put a question or two about this particular topic to our residents.
Absolutely, and that's why we ended up going with the University of Maryland on this versus going with some of the other options I looked at, because there's a lot of flexibility. We can actually add our own questions and review that. So yes, that phase is built into the process for the council and me to kind of take a high level look at it. And the other thing that has been moved back but scheduled is the CPR and first aid class. That's for staff, contractors, and council members. And I've also started inviting volunteers from the different committees. So if anyone's online or would like to join that, there's a limited spot. So I kind of need people to commit to being here. I've sent around a form for people to RSVP to that. I think it's really important for people to be up to date and trained on that stuff. So if you don't have your certificate, here's an opportunity. The village will pay for you to get your 2-year certificate. So that is scheduled for November 2nd. And project updates, Brookville Road, I'm reviewing next week with the engineer, Jason Azar, the final plan that he's hoping to fast track with the State Highway Administration to get our state permits for. That is done and ready to go. All the surveying's done. So we're ready to move forward. As soon as I have that meeting and make sure that everything we know needs to be addressed is addressed in that plan, we can host a listening session of some kind to show all the residents that plan for that sidewalk. I know there's a lot of interest, so we'll get that scheduled shortly as well. The resident directory, I've been sending around a form for people to update their contact information. We think we know who everyone is in the village who's over the age of 18, but we know for a fact that some people have old emails, people have multiple emails, people have phone numbers that no longer work. So we're sending around a form asking people, even if you think we have your updated information, please update that form. It's been slow so far coming in, so I'll be sending out a couple more emails asking people to fill it out.
On
Even if
that
you,
question,
yeah.
and the election committee discussed whether they need to hire somebody to help update the roles. And they discuss, and I reinforce that this update to the directory will be helpful to them. It will be essentially doing the same thing that they would have done.
Absolutely. I should have the list done right when they would need it. And also that we have the data from last year when they did hire a consultant that
So this year
that
they don't
shows
need
everyone they removed because, you know, they died, but they're still in the county roll or whatever the case might be. So we still have that list of people that were removed, so we could just go through the list and make sure that double check that those people were removed this year as well. So yeah, absolutely. This whole serves multiple purposes. And actually, it's not just the printed resident directory, it's also my contact list from here from the village that I'm updating as well. And at the same time, I'm moving in the next bullet point here under project updates is I'm about to roll out a new mass notification system that can text people, call people, and I'm going to be using this new resident list, office list, to upload our contact list into there. And that's how I'm going to be emailing you. So your email that you fill out on this form is going to be the way I'm going to contact you forever. So that's, and also, you know, traditionally we've been updating this every 2 years. I would actually make a recommendation to this council to update it every single year. And on an ongoing basis, I'm going to be updating as people are moving in or moving out, or I learn something happens to someone. But I kind of think it would be half the amount of work if we just updated it every single year. And it's not that much money to do a reprint or something. So that's another idea as well. And then under buildings, I did attach at the very back of your packet today, the building administrator's report. The one thing of note is 204 Oxford, which I reported on last month. They are now finally done with their plans. The county has approved their updated plans that the building permit administrator tells me it is in line with our code and he signed off on it. So the last step is now we're ready to schedule the resident informational meeting. And you all remember that we've been directed to open those up to everyone in the village, even though the code says people that are directly next door. We're just going to invite everybody. So I'm working to schedule that over the next week or so with the developer and with Doug and with myself. And you all, of course, will be invited. I know we get a lot of council participation, but also resident participation in those sessions. So that's being scheduled soon. And that concludes my shortest report yet.
Well, thank you, Michael. What a thorough report.
We love brevity.
Could we
It's
give
full
a
of
shout
love.
out to Michael too? I mean, the turnout today and just the extra messages and all that, that I know that there are residents and council help, but Michael, thank you for doing that. I mean, that turnout was really amazing and great.
I think a record. I think.
Like a record. Okay. All right, so this is the second opportunity to hear any more resident comments for those who are still with us. I just wanted to remind everybody once again about that deadline. It's 5 p.m. tomorrow for the about RE attainable housing. And I'm gonna cancel the council comments bullet here because I think our discussion about the Chevy Chase Village letter and now our statement before the 5 p.m. deadline can, cover that. So I'm gonna open it up to the residents. I'm gonna look at home and I see Marty's hand is up. She beat you to it, Larry, and then you
Yeah.
can comment. Okay, Marty?
First, I want to just say thank you so much to Katie and the entire council for this session. This is one of the most important village council meetings that I've been to in 40 years. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for sending a placeholder letter tomorrow so that we don't lose our place in terms of that. That's great. A couple quick questions. Michael, congratulations on the regroup new communication system. Thank you. And you and I had not talked about updating the directory every year, but the election committee, I feel very confident to speak on behalf of all of us, would be immensely grateful for that. Arthur, you're exactly right that if we keep the village, managers list up to date, then doing the voter roll is much, much easier. So Michael and Arthur, thank you. You're both right on that. I think we should do the directory every year. And final question I had quickly was about the survey, which sounds like it's going to be much improved this year. Will residents or committees like the election committee be able to add questions to that survey? I appreciate that the council and Michael will put questions in, but there was some discussion last year about having residents and or committees also put some questions on the survey. And I'm wondering where we are on that. And that may be an answer from Michael or the council or both about the survey questions.
That's something
So-
we've considered, but. go
So
ahead.
the tool explicitly states that this is a tool for the council's consideration. So if the council is interested in adopting questions from interest groups or resident groups or committees, they're more than welcome to do that. But my directive here is to follow
But
the
that's
council's.
That's a good suggestion that we ask for possible potential questions, and then we consider them as to whether we want to include them. Is that a reasonable thing?
Sure,
Okay. Yeah, we have,
we could consider.
right, okay.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity for some input there. Thank you.
Good.
As long as it's not building in too much time or we're not getting delayed and going back and forth on wording or something. I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Good.
you.
Okay, Larry, did you have a comment, question?
Yeah. First off, Michael, I'm really sorry about this, but I didn't come here because all your hard effort. I just came for Katie's.
For the cookies. He's here for the cookies.
I have to
Came
get
for
one.
the cookies.
That's
and
on the record,
Stayed
you know.
for the meeting. There's a tagline.
Do I look like that? What am I here for? The cookies.
I'm putting that in the minute.
My feeling is that if you want to get as many of the people in the village to do something, and there's a process they have to follow, you have to hand it to them on a platter. If you want a good response. So I was wondering if there's any way the council could send out an email tomorrow with a link that people can use to get their 5 o'clock submission in. Because I can guarantee you that at least 15% the people wanting to do it will not find the link. So that's what I was going to ask.
Okay.
And actually, Katie, I was gonna mention that, and we can talk about this just administratively, but I think that would be nice, and again, I think recognizing that there may be those folks, there may be folks in the community who are supportive or whatever it might be. I don't think we need to lead into the feedback that folks would submit, but just remind them that by the deadline that they should submit any questions or concerns or support they may have for the plan by this time. And then two other things, and again, we can take offline administratively, would be, and we saw this that the Village of Chevy Chase did. They did share with the residents that their board had voted to submit a letter and sent a copy of the letter out to residents. And so just want to, at the timing of that sounds, because we are going to race to get a couple sentence letter to submit, but just the idea that we do want to share that with our residents so they know. And then Katie, I defer to you. As you know, Lou, who I believe is a vice chair for the Village of Chevy Chase, they also submitted it to the mayors and the folks who are on that group, just letting them know here is the letter they submitted. So I just want to kind of, there's a process of just sharing and openly letting folks know what we've done. And that might be a good thing to follow.
The other thing was, I thought of Holly Worthington, who, is the manager of like 3 Long and Foster offices. So she's being the kind of person I talked to about this. But years ago, when I was a licensed realtor, we could take a customer and set them up so that any changes in property in an area that they might be interested in, like Martin's Additions, they would get notices automatically about sales. And if there's a way that the village office could get notices when there's a change of property here using the MRIS system, that would be a huge benefit to you immediately knowing when something's changing hands.
I already have that, Larry.
Oh, you have it, and
Yeah,
it
I was
comes to
gonna
you
say,
automatically.
Michael already knows. Yeah, I think he has it. Michael's ahead of the game.
And Larry, I just want to say congratulations because of the years of your advocacy around the fire hydrants. You now have a direct line to the county executive, and he told one of his main staff members to follow up. So you
Thank you.
hit your jackpot tonight.
Yeah, because I've gone to every one of them, and they don't have the paint seal broken where they would unscrew them to flush them.
So now we know you've gone now directly to, you can hold Elrich accountable, and we'll be here to follow up with you.
Yeah, I'm gonna still yell at Arthur. It's
Okay.
Arthur's fault. So.
Oh, my fault.
Well, if there aren't any other comments, I don't see any more out there. Well, I want to thank everyone for attending tonight's meeting. I hope everyone found it informative. I'm really psyched that we got Mr. Elrich here. I'm going to move into a closed session, but first I just wanted to recognize, Arthur, do you have an October birthday?
I do, yes, I did have an idea.
Okay, well, I wanted to say happy birthday. We have a quorum of October birthdays on the council.
Wow.
Arthur, Jeff, and myself are all October babies. So happy birthday to us. And thank you to our staff,
Libras.
Michael, for all your work, and to Aaron. We look forward to seeing everyone at our next meeting, November 21st. So I'm going to make a motion to move into a closed session under the Open Meetings Act to, where's my
Thank you.
little form
Good
here?
night.
Thank you, Larry.
Take a cookie.
I did.
To
Get all wood.
consult with counsel to obtain legal advice.
Good.
All right,
That's good. That's a motion. Do I have a second?
I will second that.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay,
Thank you all.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
And we have Ron? Okay.